Cerebus number 191, February 1995, Dave Sim, The Big Picture. For a long time, the direct market was supported by greed. A majority of sales was to speculators who were in the market to turn a profit on inflated back-issue prices. For a time, back-issue prices in the price guides reflected genuine dollar value. You would get 50% of the stated value selling your comics to a dealer. This is pretty standard in collector markets everywhere, and only on the books that the dealer could turn around in pretty short order. The standard payment for low-demand books was, and is, a nickel each. A lot of the speculators were rich on paper and found when they went to sell their books that their $5,000 collection only netted them $400 or $500. When Wizard appeared on the scene, a short market evolved. Specific comic books, only 2 or 3 months old, went up in value to $10 or $15. This worked for a while. Now a lot of books valued at $15 in Wizard are being dumped at one-day conventions for 50 cents. These are still books that a dealer will give you 50% of a price guide for, but they are very much in the minority. There was a great sigh of relief all the way around as the speculator market collapsed in on itself. What was ignored by almost everyone was that this made the comic book market much, much smaller than it was widely perceived to be. The retail community was unanimous in its verdict and its recommendation to its customer base: just buy comic books that you like and enjoy reading. Speculation is a dead end. Greed and speculation became a very marginal part of the marketplace. What the retail community didn't take into account was that comic books were not very enjoyable to read, for the most part. By any measure, a vast majority of the retailer's stock could be classed as unreadable, their own recommendation working against them. They were, and for the most part are, misinterpreting what it is that they are selling and to whom. Most retailers have not read a Marvel comic in 5 years, with the exception of Marvels and a handful of others. Superhero comics have changed out from under them, distilled to their very essence of adolescent male power fantasies. Even that term exalts the material above its actual nature. What retailers are selling is mindless mayhem. What they fail to see, for the most part, is that video games are becoming a good deal more sophisticated. For $3, a 12-year-old kid can participate in mindless mayhem, beating shit out of the bad guy. Traditionally, that same 12-year-old would have entered the comic book marketplace. Now, with video games, TV animation, and toys cluing in to just how easy it is to tap into that urge towards mindless mayhem, colorful costumes with lots of armor and spikes and big guns and muscles, comic books have unbeatable competition. Toys, animation, and video games have one thing in common: they move. Comic books do not. Let's call it sadism, and let's call it Phase 2. Phase 1, greed doesn't sell comic books. Phase 2, sadism doesn't sell comic books. That leaves us with the retailer's own recommendation: just buy comic books that you like and enjoy reading. Their customers have taken this very much to heart. A customer doesn't go into a comic book store in search of his favorite title anymore. Whatever his favorite title is, it has probably undergone 3 or 4 massive transformations in the last year. Once you change the basic underpinnings of mindless mayhem, this is what the costume looks like, this is the bad guy, these are the friends, this is the conflict, you are selling a new commodity. The average 12 to 14-year-old customer scans the racks and picks a few things that look cool. For the most part, they don't find anything that they enjoy reading for any length of time, so the next time they pick something else. Every week there is another selection of cool covers to pick from. A comic book that doesn't sell out in a week doesn't sell out at all. With a toy, with TV animation, with video games, the mindless mayhem is different every time out. Familiar enough to maintain interest and brand loyalty, but different enough to keep them from coming back for more. While Phase 1 was welcomed by every level of the direct market, Phase 2 is being ignored. The evidence is right in front of the retailers' noses. Those comic books that are genuinely interesting and worth reading and which have a loyal customer base are holding their own, moving up slowly in circulation or declining in sales at a slower rate than the rest of the comic books. Those that are composed of mindless mayhem are on a very rapid decline. Friends, retailers, countrymen. My assessment comes down to this: If you have a large and stable audience composed in large measure of greed and sadism devotees, you need a large store, or many large stores, to service that demand. Once you eliminate greed and are unable to compete for the sadism audience, you are left with a very small core audience/customer base. If your retail philosophy, endlessly drummed into your customers week after week and month after month, year after year, is just buy the comic books you enjoy reading, and 70 to 80% of the comic books you display every week are virtually unreadable, abruptly changing course and direction and structure and supporting cast and look and feel every 6 months, then you are selling your customers on something other than what you're selling, aren't you? The mindless mayhem that you're selling has to be sold structurally. With a video game, TV animation, or an action figure, it's very simple. This guy is the good guy. This guy is the bad guy. They have a big fight. In order to compete, you would have to know the plot of every mindless mayhem comic book that you sell. Every week you would have to lay the groundwork for getting your customers excited about the conflicts to come. When Thor joins the Godwheel title, whom is he going to fight? What are they going to fight about? You have to know the ins and outs of every superhero title that you sell. You have to know 2 or 3 months ahead of time what the big fight is going to be. Well, you can't, can you? Let's face it, the editors don't even know who is going to fight whom and what they are going to fight about. Right now, as we speak, hundreds of thousands of dollars are being wagered by the retail community that what we are doing as a marketplace is waiting for the next big company to come along, a company that will feature a handful of hot titles and instantaneous fan-favorite characters written and drawn by fan-favorite writers and artists. Every single issue of every single title will have the audience on the edge of its seats waiting to see what happens next. Hordes of 12-year-olds will have their faces pressed against the glass a half hour before opening time on New Comics Day, vibrating with the hope that the new issues of whatever have come in. Let me mention parenthetically that this is what you had with Image. Your resentment of these flashy upstarts was what compelled you to make Just Buy Comics You Enjoy Reading a universal recommendation. I was talking to a retailer a couple of weeks back on New Comics Day. His shipment arrived and he signed off with a time to face the hordes. Hordes? I asked provocatively. Well, he allowed, maybe one horde. No hordes, no horde. Time to face the music. When a band finds that they have lost their audience with a New Direction second or third album, they start playing smaller venues. They don't book Shea Stadium, defiantly asserting that the ticket merchants are wrong. There are far more than 2,000 people clamoring for tickets to see them. If it takes 3 weeks to sell 2,000 tickets, you cancel the tour and rebook in venues where 2,000 people will look like a crowd. It is accepted for the most part that there are too many comic book stores for the size of the market we are left with, now that greed and sadism aren't as bankable as they once were. Most stores that are starting out are attempting to compete by opening in proximity to established stores and siphoning off business. The 18-year-old and up market is larger than it's ever been. The 12 to 14-year-old market is smaller than it's ever been. There is no miracle company coming to save the 12 to 14-year-old market. Comic books don't move, video games do. Comic books don't move, TV animation does. Comic books don't move, action figures do. The demand for readable, interesting comic books is solid, but it is very small. It is getting larger slowly. I was talking to another retailer who was making an observation that is nearly universal: how difficult it has become to sell new comic books even to comic book fans. He sees a fan of Cerebus in his store. He shows him another title. Here, I think you'll like this. The fan doesn't want to buy it. The only thing this retailer, and most retailers, have found that works is to let the fan take the book home and read it. If he doesn't want the book and he brings it back in the same condition, the retailer won't charge him for it. Invariably, the fan comes back and says, "Wow, that was really good. Here's the money. I want to subscribe to the future issues in my pull file." The success rate for this approach at the retail level is 90% or better. 90%. This approach works better than a signing, better than a discount coupon, better than a flyer, better than a full-page ad in a comics publication. Retailers know which customer is likely to enjoy which title. I call it the Elvis Presley syndrome. When Elvis first went into Sun Records and wanted to record some songs, the receptionist asked him whom he sounded like. I don't sound like nobody. That's the problem that quality comic books face in the market. We don't sound like nobody. Terry Moore don't sound like nobody. Jeff Smith don't sound like nobody. The average comics fan and/or retailer would disagree with that. Terry Moore sounds like Dave Stevens. Jeff Smith sounds like Walt Kelly. By that reasoning, Elvis Presley sounds like Bing Crosby. Elvis don't sound like nobody. Terry don't sound like nobody. Jeff don't sound like nobody. In Elvis's case, it was a matter of getting copies of his singles to radio stations, mostly colored radio stations, and letting the record prove its point. Elvis don't sound like nobody. I gotta get me that record. That guy don't sound like nobody I ever heard. Reviews and recommendations don't usually work. Should appeal to fans of Star Trek and ElfQuest. You can't sell a record by just saying how good it is. You can't sell a comic book by just saying how good it is. You play a record to show how good it is. You read a comic book to see how good it is. Heavy rotation for a new single means that you play the ass of it on the radio and on MTV. The Cerebus preview is like a guest shot on a network television show. One-time exposure. 20,000 people get to see a new comic book, a big enough sample that hopefully they'll have an idea of whether or not it's their cup of tea. It's still pretty inadequate. A couple of seconds out of Jason Lute's album or Paul Pope's 2-album set. It's still a lot more effective than the distributor's catalogs or the average store's newsletter, which just reproduces the album cover or the picture sleeve of the EP. The only place where the true equivalent of heavy rotation is possible is in the comic book stores. A retailer is resistant to the idea of handing out reading copies of a comic book or letting customers take home a copy over a weekend. This ain't a library, kid. Runs very deep in the veins of comic book merchants. But look at the analogy with a single in the music business. If someone has heard a song, hears the song in fact every hour or so for several weeks, why does he or she buy the record, single, or CD? Why is it that a customer given a comic book on approval doesn't come back the next day and say, "Thanks, chump, now I don't have to buy it"? Because like a single, record, or CD, once they own it, they can listen to it, read it, whenever they want. Why do we all watch It's a Wonderful Life every Christmas? We know the story, we know most of the dialogue, we know how it ends. Quality. Quality, pure and simple. The best comic books are the best advertising for comic books, not the comic books that have been made into movies, not the comic books that are best-selling toys, not the comic books that look like stationary video games. This is a leap of faith, I know. The only reason I can suggest it is because times have become so desperate at the retail level that a lot of retailers are ready to try anything to save themselves and their businesses. The reason I can suggest it is that I am not telling retailers anything they don't already know. The success rate for quality comics on approval, take this home and read it, if you don't like it, bring it back and there's no charge, is very, very high. Much higher than Yellow Pages advertising, flyers, coupons, etc., etc. It is a part of most retailers' business already. The demand for quality comic books is growing. If there are 20 stores in a city and 15 of them close down, the Cerebus fans are going to go to one of the 5 remaining stores to buy Cerebus. The Cerebus phone books sell pretty well wherever they are sold. Stores that order a lot sell a lot. Stores that order a few sell a few. Stores that give customers a copy of High Society to take home and read sell more than stores that have the phone books wrapped in plastic and taped shut. The comic book marketplace is very different from any other marketplace. Traditional marketing methods don't work here. Comics on approval is the only system I can think of that has a high success rate in the comic book field. And that system only works with quality, genuinely different material. As times become more desperate at the retail level, I think it only makes sense to move away from what isn't working and apply more time, energy, and money to what does work. The market is getting dramatically smaller very, very quickly. None of us has a clue as to how small the market is going to get. I think it is safe to say that it will get smaller and smaller until the residue of greed and sadism is gone, and what is left are quality comic books which are, in the retailer's own words, worth reading. How many fans will be left? How many customers? 50,000? 30,000? How many stores will be left? 500? 100? 50? Will comic book stores even exist at that point? Or will companies that function on a mail-order basis, like Westfield, become larger and larger as the geographic distance between surviving stores makes shopping by mail the only practical alternative for a customer contemplating a 100 or 200-mile drive to his nearest store? The only given is that there will always be people who want to write and draw comic books, and there will always be people who want to read the comic books those people write and draw. What exists between those two realities, publishing, distributing, and retailing, in Larry Marder's words, is up for grabs. Direct sales virtually wiped out the ID newsstand business as a presence in the comic book marketplace, and it did it in a little over 10 years. There is no reason to think that we have arrived at a destination. The comic book marketplace is a process, is mutating, as it always mutated, to reflect the changing needs implicit in getting stories and art from those who write and draw them to those who want to see and read them. If millions of dollars being thrown away on splashy trade show booths, dinners, full-color multi-page advertising were an effective way of accomplishing that goal, the companies who indulge in such nonsense would have had a much better year. If bigger were implicitly better, then all of the small comic book stores which are owner-operated would have been wiped out or bought up by megastore chains in the last year. Instead, it is the chains of stores who find themselves in the most perilous position at the retail level, saddled with debt, dealing with crippling levels of inventory. Bigger is demonstrably not better. Self-publishers are in a much better position to weather the coming storm than are the large companies. Owner-operated, and particularly owner-managed, one-store operations are in a better position to weather the coming storm. Retailers who are willing to downsize their operation in proportion to the diminishing size of the comic book marketplace, I think, stand a better chance of coming out on the other end more or less in one piece. If there were some other means of promoting comic books that worked as well as letting someone take them home on approval, I would recommend it, but I can't really think of any. The Cerebus World Tour book with 80 pages of comics for $2.95 will, I hope, prove useful in the same way that Cerebus number 0 did, providing a low-cost incentive for people to try the book. Of course, I have the luxury of having 80 pages of out-of-print material to work with. I wouldn't be taking this many pages in the front of Cerebus trying to analyze what's going on and offering the only solution I can see if I didn't think the situation was getting desperate or see the stores as worth saving. My instincts tell me just to stay on the sidelines and see what there is left to work with in another 6 months or so. I like to think that retailers will recognize that mindless mayhem has had its day and that it's now time to start over again with comics worth reading, whether they are self-published, small press, or mainstream books, and recognize as well that it has been their own insistence on just buying comics you enjoy reading, which has hastened our arrival at this point. I think that was the right thing to do. I think the disparity between that honest sentiment and the actual content of the stores has to be eliminated if comics retailing is to survive in its present form.